Black Horse Pub. Well, the biggest little television in the world, and click on that, and click on that, and
Hello.
guess what? As a magic, there we are.
Oh, there we are. Hello.
Harry.
Now,
Hello.
let me go any further. Before we go any further, allow me the great privilege of presenting the most wonderful person who is at my side. This young lady, her name is Anne-Laure Chausserie. And Anne-Laure is the guide conférencière. She is the guide and meetings organizer for the tourist office in Domfront-en-Poiret, which is the little town where I live, as you know, little town of about 5,000 people, but very famous because it was the home of Henry II, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Richard the Lionheart, you name it. We've got a history that you could never couldn't believe. So here we are, and I believe today you wanted to talk about tourism, and particularly
Indeed.
tourism in Domfront. Well,
can you move your camera a little bit, Harry? Because we've got lots of you and
Yeah.
very little of our guests.
Okay, well, I'm going to go back a bit. I mean, yeah, she's far prettier than I am. So
yes, and just turn your camera a bit more to your right.
Yeah, is that better?
Excellent. Yes, that's much better. Yeah, in living color. Yes. Good morning.
Good morning to you. So now then, tourism, we're calling you from a typical Norman day. It's a miserable grey day, just the kind of day which we should attract millions of British tourists to see us, because I can tell you that in the summer it is actually gorgeous here. But it's just as well we're in the warmth at the moment and able to talk about it from a nice dry place. And I understand that you are in your new quarters now. Is that correct?
Indeed. Is that's the pub that you saw on the banner headline? Strange enough, I was just looking around because it's only our second day broadcasting from here. We tried it out last Friday and it seemed to work. So here we are on Monday, and I look up on the wall, and who do I see? A picture of Tom Paine.
Oh, Tom Paine! My goodness,
yes. Who almost you lot over there almost cut his head off.
Mm-hmm. Well,
we actually managed to lose it.
Sure. And it looked like a lovely spot. The Black Swan, it's called, is it?
A Black Horse.
Black Horse, because when I saw the pictures in the lead up to, just so gorgeous, so typically English, and it made me wonder what I'm doing here.
Well, it's not as old as the White Hart, but it was built in about 1820, so old enough. One of the three oldest pubs in Lewes. So it goes back a long way, and I'm happy to say it has retained the character of an English pub. I mean, you know that a lot of them have been fancied up, and I'll be interested to find out from our guests about modernizing things to cater to the tourists. But this pub has stayed a pub. And when you come in, is the first thing that you find are people clustered around having a pint. It has a very good Sunday lunch. But other than that, it remains much of muchness in terms of being a pub and not having been turned into a restaurant pretending to be a pub?
Well, this is it. I think a few years back, when the drink drive laws became quite draconian, they decided that the economic future of the English pub lay in providing food. Now, pubs had always provided food and good basic pub food, but they moved into the sphere of the gastropub. And so food began to dominate the drink, and then drink became more and more expensive. Beer, which was the poor man's drink at the time, has now become the rich man's pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I think the whole concept of the British pub has changed, but people like you and me, who are roughly about 200 years old, I believe we are, we go back to the time when pubs really meant something, and I suppose still do as community meeting places. I'm always persuading my good wife that I don't go to the bar to drink. I simply go because it's convivial and I need to exchange with the local population. Yes. And that the glass of whatever is purely incidental. But however, there we go. She doesn't believe me. And but the pubs
one of the interesting things, Harry, is that there is a pub here in Lewes, and it's called the Gardeners. And the reason that it's called the Gardeners is it was once owned by a gardener, and he used to invite his mates at the end of the day when they'd finished gardening into his front room, and eventually decided, what the hell, might as well turn it into a pub. And it has no more food than pickled eggs and small pork pies, and it consistently comes out as the winner of the Pub of the Year award. So there are a few more people around a bit like us.
Well, that's wonderful, and that goes back to how the English pub began. I suppose the various Innkeepers Acts, which have been enacted throughout history in Britain, led to the birth and, in fact, eventually the evolution of the typical English pub, with many laws applied that people don't realize are still on the statute books. An innkeeper is supposed to give warmth, food, and sustenance, and I think drink, to any traveler that goes by. You cannot turn them away, theoretically. I mean, in the modern hotel world, of course, if the hotel is full, you've got to look somewhere else. But there's some silly old rules that still apply to old hostelries, and they're
good for them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to have moved around, but it's a sudden burst of sun, and it was coming right into my eyes. So I'm trying to just make sure that I can look at the screen without squinting. But anyway, Harry, let's bring in your beautiful guest, and let's start to talk about tourism, shall we?
Well, yes, indeed, because tourism, as you know, is a major industry in France. Perhaps the biggest one. It rivals pharmaceuticals and manufacturing, and tourism in France represents about 8% of the economy, considerably more than it does in the British economy, which is a tourist destination as well. I think in the British economy, tourism is only about 3%. So you can see it's a major player in France, and France is, of course, the world's largest single tourist destination, which welcomes some 90 million people per year. Far more than anybody else. Britain welcomes about a third of that number. But the interesting point that I was discussing with Anne-Laure just a moment ago, because she's a professional in the tourism industry, I am not, is that, of course, France is a country which is transited by many people on their way to other countries, such as Portugal, Spain, Italy, wherever.
And Harry, so, I'm going to hold you there because this is your show, your guest. I shall sit on the sidelines with a stupid grin on my face while you chat to
Anne-Laure.
You can bring out these points with your usual incisive interview and comments. As I say, I'll sit with a stupid grin and listen to the two of you.
Well, in that case, let me go ahead, because I've known Anne-Laure for quite a number of years now. She's a fixture in our town, as indeed are her parents, who are delightful people. And so she grew up here, and there's nobody better qualified than she is to talk about Domfront. So I'm going to ask her some questions. I already know half of the answers, but I want to see if I've got them right.
Yes.
And that
and
is.
Of course, our audience won't know the answers, so feel free to repeat them.
Okie dokie. Okay. Now I'm going to ignore you. And I'm going to talk to Anne-Laure.
Right.
Okay. Now then, Anne-Laure, you were born here, were you?
Yes, I was born here a little less than 40 years ago. Yeah, I was born in Domfront, and I'm living just in the suburb of Domfront, and I work here. I've been working at the tourist office for more than 15 years now, between 15 and 20 years, because I was coming for the season, as we call it, even if we can't call a season here in Domfront. But I was working in the summer here, just between all my university years. So instead of going on holiday in Spain, I was working here in Domfront with the beautiful weather.
That's great. And not only were you born here, but your parents live here. Your parents have a wonderful story to tell. They're teachers. Well, they're retired now from the teaching profession, but I believe they met in Britain, didn't they?
Yes, if I remember it well, they were what we call assistant in Nuneaton, and yes, they met there because my father was quite well known at university, and my mom not at all. And when they were in Nuneaton, she saw him in the street or at the library or something, and she said, "Oh, you are," and he said, "Yes, I am," because he was really well known, and this is how we met because actually the food in the place where he stayed was awful, I think you would say, and my mom used to cook for him. So this is how she got him, by le ventre, as we say in French. She got him by the belly.
Well, that's right. The way to a man's heart is through his stomach, I believe, is the expression that we use. So that worked out very well. In fact, I got to know Anne-Laure's parents long before I met Anne-Laure. And so they're happily established here. And Anne-Laure has also done quite an amazing thing for a young woman. She's built her own house, and a very lovely house she's built, an eco-friendly house. So she's there and well established. And she is now, as I say, very much part of the life in Domfront. And when we want to know anything about tourism, we go to her. So I'm going to ask her one or two questions now. And Anne-Laure, how many tourists do we get in Domfront every year?
Well, if we get rid of all the COVID years, because it's of course it's not relevant. But before COVID, we would see 17,000 people inside the tourist office. And we've got to double that number to have the real number of visitors in Domfront, which is approximately 30,000, because a lot of people do not enter the tourist office because they were afraid of me or they do not need information, really. So, yeah, 30,000 people visiting Domfront every year.
So that's an interesting multiplication factor, because you reckon then roughly about half of the people who come to Domfront go to the tourist office. I think you're selling yourself short there, because while the tourist office provides quite an amazing service and is one of the best tourist offices I've come across in France, I do feel that a lot of people, when they arrive in Domfront, they find their own way, and only in extreme needs do they then go to the tourist office for specific questions. So I would be much more generous. I think you probably get a lot more tourists than you think. And one of the reasons why I believe that is because we're on one of the main roads that leads to Mont Saint-Michel, which is one of the great French tourist destinations. And they attract approximately 3 million people a year, Mont Saint-Michel. And I would think even if just an eighth of those people went through Domfront, which we're on the main road to Mont Saint-Michel, an eighth of them would be 250,000. So quite possibly we're getting quite a bit more than that. So I would put a ratio of maybe, I don't know, I'm just guessing here, 1 in 5 visitors visit the tourist office because they find so many attractions here that they find places that they want to see and things they want to do. How would you describe the main attractions, Anne-Laure, in our town?
Well, we are working in a tourist office that is taking care of Domfront, yes, and all the area. Yes, to be honest, most of the people who come on the tourist office is because they want to get more information about Domfront. So, for a quick presentation of the town, is as you said, approximately 4,000 people living here, and a town which is 1,000 years old. This is what I say at the tourist office. You know, people come at the tourist office and they say, "Well, what can we see? What can we do?" And we present the castle, the site of the castle, which is 1,000 years old, and of course it's ruined. It's been destroyed in 1610 because it was no longer livable. No one wanted to live in the site of the castle because it was too dim, too grim to live in. But it was still devilishly working. I mean, really efficient if you wanted to have a stronghold and stay in it, and no one would take it. So it's been demolished by the French people to make sure that no one would use it against us. So the site of the castle is ruined, yes, but as I said, it's 1,000 years old, and this is what I say to the visitors, because most of them say that the site is destroyed and there's nothing to be visited there. It's not interesting, is it? Well, I said yes, there's a lot of things to learn, because as Harry said, it was part of the Plantagenet kingdom, and we know that Eleanor of Aquitaine stayed here at least two times, and christened a daughter, also called Eleanor, here in Domfront. And the husband, Henry II Plantagenet, stayed at least 10 times. So I don't know if it's, as you can read in the papers, if it's the place they favored, but we can say that they stayed here and probably enjoyed their stay. So that's one thing. One thing is the site of the castle, and the second is the medieval city that was built got bigger after the castle was finished. We believe that the masons who built the site of the castle stayed here in that part of the outcrop, and it became a medieval city fortified by 24 towers and ramparts in the 12th or 13th century. And inside the medieval city, we can still see, what is to me the most fantastic is all those little roads, paved private courtyards, and of course medieval houses from the end of medieval times, but timber framed houses, houses with a overhanging, and all those little courtyards, of course, really interesting to see townhouses in there, and traces of the past, actually. So that's the second thing. And all around, not far from the medieval town and the castle, are other places to see. We've got a 900 years old Romanesque church, Notre-Dame-sur-l'Eau, literally Our Lady on the Water, because it's just along the River Varenne, and all the countryside are natural places where you can just go for a walk with a lot of legends and everything, and manor houses owned by private people, because you know that in France it's quite different from England. It's private people owning those manor houses from the 16th, 17th, 18th century, and most of them are to be visited freely, or sometimes in the summertime you can visit the inside. So actually, there's a lot to do, a lot of things to see, a lot of things to do, and everybody's happy when they come to Domfront, because there's something for everyone except the mountains and skiing. We've got everything in here, you know. In an hour drive, we've got absolutely everything we want. So, and this is maybe to answer a question you've not asked. Maybe this is why I'm staying here in Domfront. You know, this is maybe why I was born here, and I'm still working here 40 years later.
Well, this is a very good summary of the advantages of coming here. And I'd like to pick out one or two of them for special mention. There is, you mentioned the castle, which is now a ruin because it was slighted in 1610 by the minister of Henry IV, Sully. And I've always understood one of the main reasons was because it was such a powerful castle. It was thought to be one of the three most powerful defensive buildings, castles in Europe, not just in France. And there was a concern that in the wars of religion, pitting the Catholics against the Protestants, it would be a catastrophe if it fell into the hands of one side or the other. So as a political move, it was slighted or destroyed, as we say. So it is a ruin, but it's so impregnated with history, as indeed is the whole town. Which brings me to another part. When we talk about the medieval city, Anne-Laure, rather sadly, it got hit in the bombardment by the RAF, of all people, in 1944 to try and chase out the retreating Germans after their unsuccessful counterattack at Mortain, which is not too far away from here, because I think we'll mention quickly and then a little bit in more detail later on that we are in the very heart of the World War II Battle of Normandy, a huge battleground that ranged 300 kilometers in each direction and pitted literally millions of men against each other. In one of the great battles of history. We talk about the Normandy landings as being the most noteworthy event in that campaign, but in fact it was the battle that followed, lasting 2.5 months, where the casualty figures very often hit in a single day 4 times as many people who died on the beaches of Normandy. But back anyway to the old town and the fact it was hit by the RAF in 1944, August 1944. And sadly, we lost at that time roughly about 40% of the properties that were built in Domfront. But we've recovered nicely, and what's left is literally impregnated with history. And as Anne-Laure mentioned, we have these lovely little courtyards, places to visit, and a lot of English people actually come and stay here, and not quite a number of them buy properties here because the lifestyle it's not a city lifestyle and it's not a country lifestyle. It is small town lifestyle, something that has disappeared in many parts of France, but it's still very much alive in Normandy. Normandy has its character, just like other regions in France, but it's a particular warm place and people are well received. There's a tremendous friendliness in amongst the Norman people towards strangers. And I think that comes from the fact that there's so many of this takes us back to the war, so many young people come here and sacrifice their lives for their freedom. And this expression of appreciation has been handed down generation to generation, with the result that people have made very, very welcome here. And as we see, Anne-Laure is part of a key player in that committee of welcome. But would you say, Anne-Laure, that this would be a good place to not just to visit, but to come and live, and for people, let's say, from Britain or elsewhere?
Well, I'm the living proof of that. I mean, I was born here, yeah, and I've often asked the question to myself is that, do I live here because I love medieval, le médiéval in all its aspects, or is it because it's medieval that I like medieval? You know, I often ask myself that question because I love medieval music, I love medieval literature. It's a real passion to me, you know, in everyday life. So the question is really, well, which one got here first? Is it because I was born here, or because I like it that I decided to stay here? Yeah, it's a lovely place. You know, to me, it's a lovely place because there's it's quiet in a good way. It's you can find everything that you want here in the area. You know, as you said, I've got my house built in the countryside, in the marshes. It takes me 4 minutes to come here to work, and I don't have to worry to find a place to park or to pay for a place to park. There's a quality of living, as we say, une qualité de vie, which is enormous, and quality people also. Actually, Harry, I was so happy I have met you. You know, because you're part of those people in the area that are so interesting, fascinating, and fascinated, as we say, passionnant and passionné by Domfront, and there's so many people here that want Domfront to succeed in its tourism aspect, in its everyday life aspect, and everybody gathers to find projects to make the living better and better every day, every year, I was told last week that there's an association, une association, as we say in France. It's people are willing to create a group so that they would organize more medieval things like reconstitutions. Is it right?
Yes, you know,
that's
right.
They want to create a village in the site of the castle.
So has this association been formed yet? Or?
Not yet. It's it's exactly in a month.
Okay.
Exactly in a month there will be a public.
You must tell me about that, because I find that very interesting, and that should fit in very well with a huge project which is on right now, taking a broader view of tourism and how it affects this area. Normandy is a fabulous place to visit. It's got all sorts of advantages, and yet, percentage-wise, it attracts fewer tourists than other regions in France. And I think the regional government of Normandy has decided to carry out an experiment. They want to see why tourism here only represents 6% of the Normandy economy, whereas generally it's at least 8%, and in some regions as high as 15%. So there's a lot of hidden money that can be unlocked by bringing additional tourists to Normandy to boost the economy. And the head of the regional government, Monsieur Hervé Morin, has launched a project which is called naturally the Morin Project, or Projet Morin, and whereby he has chosen two key centers, one in Upper Normandy, one in Lower Normandy. In Upper Normandy, Les Andelys, and which is on a turn in the Seine River, heading out to the Sea at Le Havre, and the other one being Domfront, to experiment with them to see that if we develop tourism in these two areas, whether that could unlock a gold mine of tourism for the whole region, for the whole of Normandy. And that project is, and sure, Anne Laure will be taking a major role in that project, because they've carried out quite extensive studies with special experts in Paris. And we're hoping that those studies will now begin to yield results. What do you see, Anne Laure, as being the next stage in the promotion of tourism, not just as for Domfront, but in the lower part of Normandy, of which Domfront is the guinea pig? It's the experiments, if you will, to try and unlock this tourism treasure.
Well, the problem with Domfront and Normandy at the moment is that people just pass through it, and they do not stay longer than we wanted. If you want figures, at the tourist office, most of the people who come at the desk and ask us for information, they say to us that they're here for 2 or 3 hours in Domfront, which is not that much. That means that we cannot give more information than just the castle, the medieval city, and the churches to visit. And that means also that we cannot push them to stay and visit places in the
which means, of course, at the same time, a lower yield, a lower economic yield, because you need people to stay, to take a hotel room or a bed and breakfast room, to go to the restaurant, spend money, go to the pub.
And the problem is that why people are just passing is because maybe at the moment, Domfront and Normandy does not represent, as you said, a key place for people to visit. Yes, it's pretty, but it's not a reason why they're coming to Domfront. They're just passing. Domfront is not a destination. It's just a point on a map. And to me, that's what is going to be important in that Morin project, as you call it. What it's got to be is it's got to make Domfront a destination. And the only way to have Domfront as a destination is to, with that project, have something huge, something completely different that is not being seen before or elsewhere.
And of course, basically to create a tourism infrastructure, because people can only stay if there's hotel accommodation. People only go to eat in restaurants if the restaurant exists. So there's I'm hoping that at the sharp end of this initiative, there will be a move to create that infrastructure. Now, can that be done by the authorities? For me, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist. I believe we've got to encourage the private sector to invest in those necessities, and to do that before we can get people to stay. You can't expect people to go to the aeroplane to fly to wherever, and then that say, oh, well, we'd better build an aeroplane. You've got to have the infrastructure in place at the beginning. And I think that's the real challenge that we have if we're going to exploit the full potential of the Projet Morin, of the Morin project. And they're prepared to put quite a significant amount of money into it. So I'm hoping that the people promoting this project are out there scouting to try and find private investment, which will create the necessary infrastructure. Do you feel we're heading down that path, Anne-Laure, or are we more into the promotional aspect as opposed to the essential, rather boring but technical, basic needs of building a tourist base?
Well, that's a huge political question.
Being a bit naughty there, because
it's a bit naughty for you to ask that question, because I'm not in a position where I can give my opinion. Really, what I can tell is that Domfront was beginning to die.
From a tourist point of view.
From a tourist point of view. Well, even in everyday life, because shops were closing one after the other, and something that we can note is that ever since 2018, when that decision by you said the regional governor, that's a nice way to say it, by Hervé Morin, was when that decision was taken. Ever since 2018, well, when it first been launched, people were like, what? It's 22 or 24 million euros invested in Domfront, really? I don't buy it. No, I don't believe it. And in 2019, when the cabinet, the councillors were recruited, people started thinking that, well, maybe it will really happen. And we saw a huge change in the town. We saw that a lot of shops being taken over, opened from scratch. We've seen a lot of change. And well, in 2020 and 2021, a lot of people were really happy because Domfront were changing and there was a lot of things merging. There was a lot of events also, especially in the summer, happening with concerts in the streets.
And of course, our famous medieval festival every couple of years. It's one of the great festivals in France.
And was huge and getting bigger, actually, because of that. People believing in the project. But I can feel, if I'm allowed to say something about it, I can feel that in 2020 and this year 2023 has not a lot happened. People starting to think that, well, that project will never happen.
But I think it was the COVID hiatus, so that dealt it a little bit of a setback. I'm hoping that things will pick up now quite substantially. And one point I'd like to make, because I can see Domfront, and I've lived here now for 13 years, so I'm becoming myself a little bit part of the furniture. But since I come from outside, I bring an outsider's view. And in fact, yes, there has been a tendency, which has been going on almost since the war, of small towns to lose a lot of their businesses as young people move to the big cities, to the new professions. And so there has been what we say in French, a désertification de la campagne, which has led to some of these small towns losing their dynamism. But I do feel, when I compare with the way I see it, comparing Domfront with other small towns of its kind, it's kept remarkably strong in terms of its economic base, it's the shops and the activities. I lived previously in France in a small town, same population as Domfront, which was stuck onto the edge of a huge city, the city of Tours. And in that town was called Montbazon, beautiful town, beautiful castle. Which was restored by somebody I won't mention on this program because humility prevents me. But do you know, in that town we had 4 businesses. 4. Here, I don't know how many businesses we have still. I think we survive extremely well by comparison to many other rural towns and centers in France. One of the reasons being is that we're sufficiently far from any other big cities that people can do their daily shopping here, meet their daily needs. If they want major purchases, perhaps they go to the bigger towns that are not that far away. But essentially, it's a town which is self-supporting. So I feel Domfront has still got very much of a beating heart, both socially and activity-wise, commercially, and will survive these downturns. And this project, tourism project, which may, with a bit of luck, extend into other activities. We have a very dynamic industrial sector zone in France with some very big companies operating in there. We produce 4 million Camembert cheeses every day at Lactalis, which is a big factory in Domfront. So it is a town that, as I say, has got a lot of latent economic strength. So I see that very positively, but that's because I look at it with an outside eye. The one question that I'd like to say to Anne-Laure is, at the weekends, we see lots of...
interrupt. I want you to continue with that. Somebody's knocking at the door, and as I'm the only one in the pub, I've got to go and let them in.
Oh, okay. Right. I'll wait until you get back, Keith.
No, carry on.
Oh, well, it doesn't stop me talking to Anne-Laure. I was going to mention this question about, at the weekends, I see lots of young people in Domfront, and I can only assume that they're the children of the local families who are away during the week studying, let's say, at the university in Caen or wherever, and they come home for the weekends. The future is of everywhere, I suppose. The future, in generic terms, is in the hands of the young. Do you feel these young people will eventually settle in Domfront and follow in the tradition of their families? Or do you think we'll lose them? Will they then, when the new professions, go to the big cities?
Well, what I saw those last 4 or 5 years is people who were born in Domfront like me and went away to bigger cities like Caen, Rennes, or even Paris and Nantes to work.
Mm-hmm.
But life there, even in Caen, was for them a nightmare because there were too many people. Life was really expensive, and we've seen the last 4 or 5 years. We've seen those Domfront-born people buying houses here in Domfront and the area and come and live here because they find in Domfront something peaceful. They find everything they want. They found their family, actually, their parents, just like me. You know, my parents were. My parents bought the house in 1973, I think, and they stayed ever since. So I see a lot of people of my age with their children.
They will be coming back.
Coming back.
Well, that's a good sign because I'm thinking.
I'm
thinking, for instance, of the young man Etienne. Je connais pas son nom de famille.
In a bar.
Who has been traveling the world. He was in the airline business.
Traveling the world. We've seen so many interesting places, probably more interesting than Domfront. But no.
And they picked up a gorgeous young lady from Thailand who is now his wife, and they have opened a business. Well, they didn't open a business, but they took over an existing business, one of our iconic houses in Domfront. It's a shame I can't show you a picture. But it's a beautiful old wood-framed building, which is often on the brochures when people advertise or when people look for images of our town. And they've opened a little bar there, and I was amazed. Well, it's more of a crêperie bar, you name it. They do quite a lot of things, a little bit of Thai cooking. And what's amazing is that when I go there, I see a whole cross-section of the population, a younger cross-section that I hadn't previously seen. It's as if they're here, but they're hidden. And I just wonder if that isn't a reflection of the potential of what could happen in Domfront as part of the big tourism project. What we need is more of that, 1 or 2 more little restaurants opening, and the young people, above all, playing a more important role.
Of course, it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Let me ask you this, Anne-Laure, as I find myself coming through your town on a night when you've got the medieval festival, and I say, "Whoa, this medieval festival! Didn't know about that. What would I expect?"
Well, you would see curious people with costumes, medieval costumes, all around the town, and running to the center of the city, because all the center of the city is a huge medieval market. And as a medieval market, you would have stalls, medieval stalls. Everyone is costumes. And of course, parades in the medieval town. People with I don't know the words now. You've got to help me, Harry.
Okay, go ahead.
The people with échasses.
Oh yes. Well, people not only dressed up, but because it incites the local populace to dress up. But the main thing, of course, is we attract huge groups of performing artists, even to the extent of having, what do you call it? Jousting competition, and in the grounds of the castle. So this sets the theme. France is known for its medieval festivals, so these are itinerant groups that go around and perform in these festivals, but each year they seem to improve and become more exciting to watch. And it's amazing when people attend these festivals, people come to Domfront, how many of them actually themselves now dress up. And there's a very efficient system in Domfront where a group of ladies have made lovely medieval costumes, which can be hired at a very reasonable cost, just a few pennies, for people to dress up for the occasion.
Yeah.
So it truly.
Now, what time of year does the medieval festival take place?
Well, it's first weekend of August every other year. So it won't be in 2024, but it will be, and we already know that, in 2025. For the rest of the year, there's a lot of things happening. This is one major point. And actually, in the project, in the Morin project, the idea is to have it every year. Because, well, visitors, they do not come every other year. They want to see that every year because it's so fun. It's so important. It's such a good time. And we see a lot of Brits, actually, during that event. I think it's 40% of the people coming to see the jousting are Brits or from foreign countries like Belgium or Netherlands, yes. But there's that medieval festival, but not only. We provide guided tours all the time, and as you can see, the guided tours can be in English too if you don't speak French. And we have concerts in the streets. We've got markets in the Sundays now, and we've got what I think is adorable is the cultural nap. Is that we've got 60 long chairs in the heart of the medieval city in a garden or in a courtyard, and there's someone here playing music or recitating texts or anything, and it's all free. And so this is why Domfront is really lively and all year round, because now November is not the best month, it's not the best month to come to Domfront because especially this year it's rainy and windy and it's awful actually. Yeah. But even
I have to just interrupt for a moment because a man who does for Lewis what you do for your town, Declan, who's just come in, and I described the pub to you, and he is the man that runs this pub. And he does a marvelous job, but he's been a publican, man and boy.
Where is he? We can't see him. Is he hiding away?
Come here, Declan. They want to see you. These are our colleagues in Normandy who are talking about their festivals, and we are enormously grateful for Declan. Sit down here for a minute. To let us come here, and there you go. And is one of the nicest people that you could ever wish to meet, I may say. You can't go out onto the streets of Lewis without saying, "I know Declan," and he's a marvelous chap.
Oh, so, now what's this?
He runs a very good pub, I'll tell you.
Now, Keith, tell me, what's this good gentleman's name?
Declan.
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 Oh, that's a lovely name. It's rare, but it's almost that's historic in itself, I guess. So you've got this wonderful pub there, have you?
I have, yes.
Yeah. Well, you're a lucky man, because when Keith was showing the titles of the program, and we saw the shots of Lewis, and Lewis is a town, in fact, of which I'm fairly familiar. But when I saw the pub, my God, I wondered how the hell I'd ever missed it. I mean, I've got to get myself over there as soon as possible.
Do you want to open a pub here in Domfront? It would be, a very good idea.
I'll have a look. I'll check the properties out.
Well, I was going to say, Harry, that we were made homeless, and Declan gave us a home. But as a result of that, we couldn't do the Dieppe Fish Festival. So I think what we should do is we should negotiate with you to actually come and broadcast for a couple of days or so at some time from your town when you deem it to be a good time to broadcast various events.
We were talking about the fish festival. Were you there, Keith?
Yes.
Yes, there are several fish festivals in Normandy. The most famous one is probably at Port-en-Bassin, and or alternatively Dieppe.
Yes,
there's a very famous one in Dieppe.
Aside, Harry, what I'm saying is that I've been listening to you and Anne-Laure about what happens in your town, and I think that'd be a good idea if we came and broadcast.
Well, it would be. You'd be more than welcome.
And we'll bring Declan with us.
Yeah.
He can suss out whether you wish you to have a pub.
Yeah.
Well, just bring two things together. Declan could be persuaded, I'm sure, to open a pub here. particularly based on the statistics that 40%, as Anne-Laure says, of the people who came to the medieval festival were Brits. And Brits have been known to take the occasional drink.
You're not wrong.
Yeah. So that would be wonderful. And, this is an interesting point here. Why not a link between ourselves and, hey, that's an idea, Anne-Laure.
Yeah.
Domfront, we're linked, or twin, I should say is the word, with a town in Portugal and with a town in Germany. But we do not, as many French towns do, we do not have a twin, an English twin. Gosh, what an excellent idea.
Yeah. Well, these things take time, but there's no reason why we couldn't start an informal one. We do that, wouldn't we, Declan? Yeah, we would.
See how it goes, because do we get along with you? Do we, people from Domfront, we will get along with you? I don't know.
I'm sure we will.
Everybody gets along with us.
Oh, yeah.
well,
Harry, I am not sporting a black eye at the moment, but I could because Sybil, or better known as Liza Page, is in. She's pacing there and ready to rip my head off if we don't actually give her time in front of the camera.
Well, listen, we've hugged all the time. I'm sorry about that. But
in fact, we've been on for 51 minutes. And,
we're very proud. We're very proud of our town, so forgive us. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you some more. But let's leave this broadcast with this incredible idea of maybe exploring twinning with Lewis. What a lovely town. I know Lewis. I know Domfront. And that would be a wonderful marriage.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Actually, Mirador is slowly finding itself in doing some of these things because the gentleman who appears at this time on a Wednesday, Dr. Professor Mark Mabey, is involved in setting up a new university in Manchester, and he wants the first satellite to be in Lewis. So I think what we can do here, we can actually start a little division of bringing stuff to Lewis that nobody else would think of. So yes, we're on for that, aren't we, Declan?
Yes.
Yeah, we're on.
Excellent idea.
Black Horse is going to spearhead a move to get some sort of link with you and.
Well, a good idea. And then just as a closing comment, I'm going to say this: that now I've seen the outside of the Black Horse, and I can't wait to see the inside. And I'm likely to make a trip there in the near future. I've got a very good friend who lives in Newark, and not far away from you, and so it'll be my excuse to come over and see him and have a pint. What beer do you serve, Declan? What brand of beer?
We've got a local beer, Harvey's.
Harvey's. I know Harvey's. Yes, I've been to the brewery there at Harvey's. Yeah. Lovely. I love it. Oh, count me in. You'll be seeing more of me.
Excellent. Sounds good to me.
Well, listen, thanks so much to all of you, and thanks to Keith as usual. And
thank you for appearing. And we've got a couple of projects now, so we're going to have to take these seriously, Harry.
We'll talk some more about that.
Yeah.
We will.
We've got work to do.
And Laura, thank you very much for coming along this morning.
Okay.
Your description is fascinating. I want to get there as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever you want.
Talk to you soon. See you,
Bye.
folks. Talk to you next week. Bye, Declan. Bye.
Toodle pip. Well, there we are, Declan. Yeah, you see the ideas that come out of television is just by a casual. I tell you, it's been like Grand Central Junction here this morning. We've had ambulances and all sorts of things. It makes life exciting. And I'll tell you, if you want excitement, wait until this lady gets in front of the camera. My God, I tell you, I tremble in fear.
See you later.
Will probably be banned and they'll close our place.
Oh, no, sure they will. Right, I'm going to go and sit in my office.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Declan. Thanks for joining us. Okay, we're just going to say toodle pip for 2 or 3 minutes while Liza settles in, and then we'll hear what she has to say, because as usual she's been fastidious with her research, and I know that there are a number of good stories coming up. So we'll just say toodle pip for one moment, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Yes, toodle pip. From Lewis.